about believing what Meghan Markle and Prince Harry said. I don't need to, because that day, you think the British media were against you. I actually think that the media was incredibly supportive of them, right to the point of the living crisis. No, the world's biggest victims right now are the Duke and Duchess of Netflix. And don't take my word.
You know what really messes with people's heads? It's not when someone outright lies. It's when the story they're telling just starts slipping. Quietly, subtly. Not because anyone launched an attack, not because there was some massive expose at first, but because the pieces stopped lining up the way they should. And that's exactly where all of this began. Meghan Markle's pregnancy with Archie. On paper, it should have been simple, joyful, straightforward. A royal pregnancy after all. But almost immediately, people started noticing things that didn't quite sit right. Small things, easy to miss things. The kind you brush off at first because, come on, who wants to question something like that? But then the photos started circulating. Taken days apart, sometimes hours apart, and somehow the bump looked different. Higher in one image, lower in another, prominent one day, barely there the next. Then there were the dates that didn't line up cleanly, and then the home birth plan. Remember that? The calm, private, natural home birth she reportedly wanted so badly. And then suddenly, without warning, it turned into a hospital delivery. No explanation, no clarification, just a switch. And that's when things shifted. Because when documents started surfacing, scheduling notes, internal timelines, memos that allegedly showed what was really going on behind closed doors, that's when Piers Morgan absolutely lost it. He went on air-waving papers like his life depended on it, saying this whole thing wasn't organic at all, that it was staged, choreographed, planned like a movie shoot. And here's the part that made people freeze. When those claims dropped, there wasn't outrage. There wasn't a furious denial. There wasn't even a carefully worded pushback. There was silence, deep, uncomfortable silence. And sometimes, silence screams louder than any statement ever could.
Nothing I thought about Meghan Markle was driven by anything to do with her race or skin color. Why would it be?
The pieces you're about to see come together in a way that's honestly unsettling once you really sit with it. Because this didn't explode all at once. It crept in slowly. It started soft, glossy, perfectly curated. The pregnancy photos looked like they came straight out of a luxury magazine. Every image was polished. The lighting was perfect. The angles were flattering. The outfits hugged the bump just enough. Nothing felt accidental. It felt intentional. Every frame, every appearance, every glimpse of her belly seemed carefully thought through before it ever reached the public. And at first, people loved it. Of course they did. A royal baby, a modern duchess. Everyone wanted to feel part of the journey. And then there was the birth plan. Meghan had reportedly been very clear about wanting a home birth. It fit the image. Natural, peaceful, private. People around her talked about it. The narrative was already set. She wanted intimacy. She wanted control. She wanted to do things her way, away from chaos and cameras. Frogmore Cottage seemed like the perfect place for exactly that. Everyone assumed that was how it would go.
She came out with in that interview. So be it. I'm always in talks with people. I think I've been talking to you all, actually.
Until May 6, 2019 arrived, and suddenly, none of that mattered anymore. She wasn't at Frogmore. She was at the Portland Hospital in London, a private hospital in Westminster. Now, to be clear, nobody reasonable is saying a hospital birth is strange. She was 37, first pregnancy. Complications happen, plans change, doctors make calls. That part alone isn't suspicious. What was suspicious was the absolute lack of explanation. No statement, no plans evolved, no doctors recommended this. Nothing, just silence, followed by a hospital birth announcement. And when you spend weeks building a narrative about privacy and home birth, then flip the script overnight without saying why, people are going to ask questions. That's human nature. And once people started questioning that, everything else came back into focus. Those carefully lit photos that once looked sweet started feeling staged, less like candid updates and more like production stills. The peace and privacy story suddenly felt rehearsed, controlled, and that's when people started digging, comparing, lining things up side by side.
You may not agree with it. I think most people who watched the interview probably ended up agreeing with me. It doesn't really matter whether you agree or not.
Photos from different weeks didn't match the timeline. The bump looked high in one, low in another, taken days later. Sometimes it looked very pronounced, other times barely visible. Sure, clothes matter, angles matter, but when the inconsistencies keep stacking up across dozens of images, it stops feeling random. Every appearance felt timed, every release felt calculated. And while celebrities manage their image all the time, there's a problem when you're also asking for privacy while clearly orchestrating every detail of the story being told. And then came the documents, allegedly leaked by someone close to the situation who'd finally had enough. Scheduling notes, internal paperwork, behind-the-scenes timelines. And according to those documents, the public story didn't just slightly miss the mark, it completely fell apart. Hospital appointments listed on days when Meghan was photographed across London. Full-day contradictions. Not an hour off, not a small overlap, entire days where she supposedly had medical visits while also being publicly seen somewhere else. And then the birth arrival. The serene, discreet hospital entry painted publicly didn't match the internal scheduling at all. According to those notes, she wasn't even there when she was supposed to be. That's when people really stopped and said, wait a minute. And once timelines were built using public photos and these documents, nothing lined up. Trimester timing didn't match appearances. Physical presentation didn't match dates. It felt like pieces from different puzzles jammed together. Enter Piers Morgan, absolutely thriving. He went through it day by day, date by date, asking how any of this could possibly make sense. And his point was simple. Pregnancy timelines don't have flexibility. Dates either match or they don't. Locations either line up or they don't. You can't be in two places at once, and when the facts don't align, something's wrong. Then he went after the bump itself. Side-by-side footage, events days apart, dramatic differences. And yes, pregnancy varies. Everyone carries differently. But changes like that don't usually happen overnight, and it wasn't just him noticing. The internet jumped in. Comparisons exploded. Timelines were built. Morgan called it marketing, not maternity. He said every image was staged, controlled, choreographed like a production. Then came the wildest claim, that multiple versions of the birth announcement were written in advance. Different narratives, different scenarios, ready to deploy. And that's where people really paused. Because who pre-writes multiple birth stories unless they're planning how the story will land? He showed footage of Meghan cradling the bump dramatically for cameras, then footage days later of her moving effortlessly, jogging upstairs, no protective posture at all. Pregnancy can be easy for some, yes, but the contrast was jarring. The very pregnant moments always seemed to appear when cameras were locked on her. Then he moved to palace staff. Meghan had spoken about being mistreated during pregnancy, coldness, isolation, but the memos painted a different picture. Staff instructed to accommodate everything, double shifts for wardrobe changes, meetings declined, then later described as exclusions. Piers read it all on air, incredulous. And again, silence. No response, no correction, no clarification. Meghan, Harry, celebrity allies, the palace, all quiet. And that silence changed the mood. People noticed, because this was someone known for pushing back, for defending herself. And now, nothing. Piers pointed out how unusual that was. And when someone who always controls their narrative suddenly stops speaking, it feels significant. Even Harry went quiet, the man who built his identity around protecting his family. No defense, no outrage, just absence. Friends disappeared, support dried up, and silence created a vacuum that the public filled with doubt. Once trust cracks, everything else comes under scrutiny. Piers kept showing clips, morning sickness claims versus public appearances, dramatic interview descriptions versus real-time footage. The contrast felt theatrical. He froze frames, compared interviews, identical pauses, identical expressions, same emotional beats delivered the same way every time. And when you see that repetition, it starts feeling rehearsed. The bigger argument became this: that motherhood itself was used as a shield, a way to shut down criticism. Question the narrative and you're attacking a pregnant woman, a new mother. And culturally, people hesitate to do that. Piers said it was strategic, effective, at least for a while. Then he questioned Harry's role. Either he didn't know everything, or he helped build the narrative. Either way, contradictions slipped through. And once those cracks appear, they spread. The palace's silence only made it worse. This wasn't about feelings, it was about dates, records, photos, documents. Either they matched or they didn't. And the more time passed without answers, the worse it looked. Supporters started questioning. Silence became its own answer. And that's what lingers. Not whether you like Meghan or hate her, but whether the story holds up. Because when narratives shift, timelines bend, and facts don't align, credibility erodes. And once that's gone, everything else gets questioned. So now people are watching closer than ever. And once you start seeing the cracks, it's hard to stop noticing them. And here's the part that really sticks in people's minds long after the clips stop rolling. Once doubt settles in, it doesn't stay neatly contained to one issue. It spreads. People start re-examining everything that came before and everything that followed. Statements that once sounded emotional start sounding scripted. Interviews that once felt raw start feeling rehearsed. Even moments that were meant to humanize suddenly feel calculated. And that's the danger of inconsistencies like this. They don't just raise questions about one timeline, they infect the entire story. You can see it in how public reactions shifted over time. Early on, criticism was brushed off as cruelty, as misogyny, as people being unfair to a pregnant woman. But once the documents, the photos, and the timelines were laid side by side, the tone changed. The conversation moved from, how dare anyone question this, to, why won't anyone answer these very basic questions? Because at a certain point, asking for consistency isn't an attack. It's reasonable. And when no one responds, that reasonableness turns into suspicion. What made this even more uncomfortable was how neatly everything fit a familiar pattern. A dramatic claim followed by emotional framing, pushback dismissed as harassment, silence when specifics are raised, then a pivot to another topic entirely. New projects, new interviews, new narratives, but never a direct answer to the old questions. And people noticed that pattern repeating again and again, not just here, but elsewhere too. And let's be honest for a second. If the documents were fake, if the timelines were wrong, if the photos were being misinterpreted, it would have been easy to shut this down. A simple clarification, a single statement correcting dates, even a vague, "this information is inaccurate," would have gone a long way. But instead, nothing. And silence, especially from people who are usually very vocal, starts to look deliberate. That's why this story refuses to die. It's not because people enjoy tearing someone down. It's because unanswered questions don't go away on their own. They linger, they get shared, they get revisited every time a new interview drops or a new documentary airs. Every new claim is now measured against old inconsistencies. Every emotional appeal is weighed against past contradictions. And whether you believe every allegation or think Piers Morgan takes things too far, one thing is undeniable. This shifted how a lot of people view the narrative. Sympathy turned into skepticism, trust turned into caution. And once that happens, it's almost impossible to reverse. Because credibility isn't something you can demand. It's something that has to hold up under scrutiny. That's why people are still talking about this. That's why the comments never stop. That's why every clip, every photo, every line from the past gets replayed and reanalyzed. Not because people want drama, but because the story that was sold doesn't fully match the evidence people can see for themselves. And now, every time a new chapter is written, it's written under a microscope. No benefit of the doubt, no automatic empathy, just questions. And a public that's watching a lot more closely than before. What do you think? Does Piers have a point, or is this completely blown out of proportion? Drop your thoughts below, and if you made it this far, hit that like button. Subscribe, because stories like this, they're far from over.